Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Arun Taneja, and I will be your moderator for the panel that's titled Hyperscale Public Clouds versus Value Add Clouds from Backup and Data Protection and Disaster Recovery Vendors. And of course, the question we're going to ask is, which is better if one is indeed better than the other? We have four very, very talented, very strong players on the panel representing ArcServe, Datto, Dell Computers, and Unitrends. Three of these offer value add, or what I might call specialty clouds, and one that offers hyperscale public clouds for backup and DR purposes. I'll introduce all of these folks in just a moment or two. But let me say a few words on why we picked this particular topic for discussion and why I think it commands a strong discussion. We know that backing up data into a second site has historically been the primary method of protecting the enterprise from a site failure. We also know how miserably expensive that method has been in the past. And I mean not just moving data over from one side to the other, but developing an entire infrastructure on the other side, compute, network, storage, and then allow the disaster recovery to take place on the other side and for the business to continue operating. I mean, it's been a horrendously expensive and complex way of doing that. The IT infrastructures on both sides, as you know, had to be 100% identical, and so the costs were therefore astronomical, and operational costs were absolutely prohibitive when you did that. And a slightest difference in the equipment between the two sites, even at the software patch level, rendered the whole failover invalid and exactly at the time when you needed it the most. I mean, this is what we've been dealing with in the past. Testing was always a disruptive process, and applications had to be shut down for tests to be performed. Costs were huge, and resources, both in terms of resources, in terms of people resources, in terms of costs, and the impact on business was huge. So no wonder when that happened, less than 5% of the applications that you had in your environment actually were protected through for DR purposes. 95% of them had to make do with sending tapes over to Iron Mountain or keeping them somewhere in somebody's car trunk or what have you. I mean, this is what we've been dealing with in the past. And then we had server virtualization come to the fore, and we still needed a second site, but at least the second site didn't have to have identical equipment. One could use lower performance hardware, lesser software, if you like, licensing wise, and still get business continuity. And all in all, this was obviously a major step forward. And in the meantime, while the server virtualization thing happened, the data protection guys weren't lying still. I mean, they advanced in technology both on the DR and BC side, and things got much more effective. But you still required a second site, which was typically owned by the enterprise. So this is exactly where the cloud came to the rescue. Why not use a hyperscale public cloud to replicate a virtual machine into the cloud, and then why not use that cloud to actually run the application, to run the virtual machine, and essentially do the DR into the cloud? Maybe it would be lower performance, maybe it would be higher frequency, higher latency. I mean, but at least you had the business up and running, and the business could continue and continue to operate. And so that was a major step forward with the cloud. And then some of these data protection vendors, three of them are on this panel. In fact, maybe even the fourth one will have something to say on this matter. these data protection vendors said, look, we're not happy with the efficiency of things and the level of service that we can get out of the hyperscale public clouds like Amazon or Azure. So they created their own cloud, and they said, look, we can deliver better service for both backup, recovery, and for DR from our own specialty cloud. And that brings us to this topic at hand. Which ones of these solutions is better for you? What are the considerations? I mean, is it better to go with public clouds like AWS or Azure? Should you use a specialty cloud? And what are the pros and cons of each? I mean, this is the first part of our discussion today, and we'll certainly spend some time on how to decide. So once we've decided which one is better and what are the pros and cons, then we're going to switch over to what are the differences between specialty clouds, because clearly not all of them are alike. So, is one better than the other? So that's the second part of what we're going to deal with today. Okay, so with that, let me do some introductions for the panelists. I'll do them in alphabetical order. So representing ArcServe, we have Christophe Bernard, who is the VP of Product Marketing. And ArcServe has been around for a long time, by the way, and I'm sure Christophe will give you a little bit of a history on that thing. They were part of Computer Associates, but then a year ago they went separate, independent, to focus entirely on data protection and cloud. Christophe joined Data Protection Management Division at CA Technologies to lead worldwide product marketing and launch the ArcServe Unified Data Protection Solution. He's got a long, extensive experience. I've known him for many years, 20 years of marketing experience, a lot of places, Legato Systems, which is now, of course, EMC, Veritas, Maxtor, Hitachi Data Systems, and most recently Data Direct before he came to ArcServe. Solid academic background with a number of degrees from European institutions, and I will not go into all the details, enough to say MBA and a business degree beyond that as well. So that's Christophe. Let me switch over to my next panelist. My next panelist is Austin McCord, founder and CEO of Datto, another company that is microscopically focused on data protection and DR. Now, Austin is a chief innovator and driving force behind the company. When Austin founded Datto in 2007, his goal was to create the best backup, disaster recovery, and business continuity solution. Datto already claims 160 plus petabytes of protected data, and so on and so forth. Let me tell you, Austin has a degree in bioinformatics from Rochester Institute of Technology, holds a number of patents. He's obviously eminently qualified to speak here. He's named in Forbes 30 under 30. He was listed last year, or actually in 2015, this year. And he boasted to me the other day that he's never interviewed for a job because he started Datto while working towards his college degree, an accomplishment that most of us can't even dream of. So we have Austin on the call here. Let me move on to my next panelist. Next, we have Abhi Dinkar, who's a CTO at the Data Protection Division at Dell. Dell does not have a specialty cloud per se, but they instead use AWS, Azure, and Rackspace. I'm sure Abhi will be talking about that. Abhi leads all the technology strategy for the Dell's data protection business. He's responsible for all various products in the Dell product line, Aperture, NetVault, vRanger, and the DR product lines. He came through Ocarina which was an interesting, very positive acquisition for Dell some years ago, and as a basis of several of the product lines. So welcome to Avi, and then last but not the least, we have Dr. Mark Campbell, Executive VP and CTO at Unitrends, another company with a long history in data protection. Prior to joining Unitrends, Mark was CEO of a company called MindAmp Corporation, which provided high technology business and software consulting to VCs and management within the A and B round startup companies. Before that, Mark has had many senior vice president, general manager type of positions with companies like Legent, and then he ran a very large AT&T enterprise systems business which was in the order of $1.5 billion in sales. So welcome to Mark Campbell on the panel. Okay, so the introduction's out of the way. Let's move on to getting the panel off the ground. I have asked each panelist to give you a very quick synopsis, no more than 3 minutes, on what they have to offer. And the whole purpose of that is to give you a context in terms of, when they speak later on and we have a Q&A, you will know where they're coming from. So that's the sole purpose of that. So I've asked them to do that right after that. And then once they've done that, we're going to go into a Q&A mode. I have prepared a whole bunch of questions for the panelists on your behalf, I hope. And I'll ask those questions. I'll point them at individuals and then let the others speak after that as well. And then you're more than welcome. And once we've done that, we'll switch over to your questions. I'm asking you to send whatever questions you have by using this BrightTalk console. Send your question throughout the session. Don't wait till the end, and I'll try and get to those questions. I'll pose them to the appropriate panelists, unless you ask them to be presented to a specific panelist. So that's the format we'll follow. And so with that, let me ask Christophe Bernard to say a few words about ArcServe, where it fits in, so that you'll have a context later on. Bernard, you're on.
Okay, thank you, Arun. It's Christophe Bertrand here, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the panel. And let me just give everyone a quick overview of who we are. And you may know the name ArcServe. Actually, if you know NetWare, and you've probably dated yourself right there, you know ArcServe. We were originally founded about 25 years ago as a company called Cheyenne, and then became part of CA for about 18 years or so. More recently, 1.5 years ago, we became overnight, I think, the largest startup in our space, becoming independent with a new financial sponsor, and really we have this great presence in the market with our new product, or newer product, called ArcServe UDP, which has recently received a number of very critical awards around virtualization, but also in a number of places around the world, and through a number of publications. So we've been very busy with our new product, and really building a portfolio that combines not only software but also hardware through an appliance, as well as, of course, a cloud offering, which is where I'm here today. We have a global presence, many customers from legacy products as well as our new product, ArcServe UDP, and we're distributed in about 150 countries around the world. So it makes for a very interesting and dynamic business that has really reinvented itself in the past 1.5 years. So next slide, please, Arun. So what we do further than that is really we look at the market as a very interesting place where we can deliver with our solution really what is a unified approach to data protection, meaning we combine not only traditional backup but really replication, deduplication, combined with what could be seen as very unnatural originally, which is ease of use, and that allows us to provide enterprise-class capabilities, but we can make that available to the IT generalist. You don't have to be a specialist, a backup specialist, to really benefit from all of the capabilities of the product. At the same time, you can really drill down, double-click, triple-click, if you're an expert, to get to those fine parameters. So combining, unifying data protection capabilities and technologies, making it very simple and easy to use, and providing what I consider enterprise-class features, which really combine protection for both physical and virtual, as well as a number of technologies around data protection to make it a very, very efficient system. In particular, and it will really be my closing comment, data deduplication. I think that's one of the areas where, in combination with deployments in the cloud, you really get to see a lot of benefit as an end user. So that's our serve, and again, we're a little bit of a blast from the past from a names perspective, but we're really this new independent company, and very, very pleased to be on the panel, Arun.
Thank you very much, Christophe. Thank you. And next we'll move over to Austin McCord with Datto. Austin, if you can give us a little brief introduction on Datto, please.
Sure, absolutely. So Datto is a hybrid cloud backup and disaster recovery vendor. We were founded in 2007. We currently have 6 offices with locations around the world. We have about 550 employees to date. We protect just over 50,000 businesses these days, and we sell to them through a network of thousands of resale partners around the world as well. We run an incredibly large private cloud at over 160 petabytes in scale. Our solutions typically tend to be a hybrid cloud solution, so that means there's an on-prem appliance that may be either a physical or a virtual appliance combined with our cloud backend. And then finally, the big piece that tends to separate us from lots of people who play in this space is our ability to restore systems of any kind nearly instantaneously. Whether it's physical or virtual, it doesn't matter. We can bring those systems back right away with a single click, and we can do that both locally on-premise or in the cloud. And that's something that has really been kind of the catalyst, I think, for a lot of Datto's growth over the past couple years. We continue to grow very quickly. If I get the next slide, Arun.
Sure.
So beyond that, Datto is rapidly working to build out a platform for data protection. We look at it as something that it's very hard for CIOs to win in the data protection space, and instead it's only somewhere where you lose, where basically the business only notices if there is a disaster and you left something uncovered or something failed. And so in Datto's case, we want to be the single vendor. We want you to work with one of our partners as a way to go and say, hey, just handle this for me. I don't want to think about it anymore, and I want it on one simple price point. And so with that, our goal is really to implement total data protection and an ability to protect business data no matter where it lives. And so Datto has solutions across an incredibly wide variety of platforms, from desktops with our own cloud to our solutions Cirrus and Alto for both physical and virtual servers, to our upcoming connectivity product DNA that actually brings failover capabilities to networking and makes it available all the way down at the SMB level, to the ability to actually protect systems that are running in the cloud through our virtual Cirrus and virtual Alto appliances. And this means we can even protect systems that are running in a public cloud. And then finally to SaaS applications, which last year Datto purchased the largest SaaS application protection vendor, Backupify, and we're just completing the integration of them inside our company. So we have really a tremendous ability to protect business data no matter where it lives. And that's what I've got.
Thank you, Austin. That's great. Next we have Abhi Dinker from Dell. Go ahead, Abhi.
Thanks, Arun. Dell has a fairly large portfolio of data protection software and appliances. I've put a few of the key ones over here. There's I would say at least another 4 or 5 more, which probably are not as relevant to this conversation. So most of these products come to Dell via acquisitions, and over the last 3 to 4 years, we have worked quite hard in integrating and sharing common technology aspects across these applications to the point where this year and next year we will be launching interesting functionality across our product portfolio. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but some of the interesting aspects of these software products that I want to talk about. I'll start with Aperture, soon to be rebranded as Rapid Recovery. This software is probably the most cloud-connected backup application out there. We support pretty much all public clouds, as well as we have partnerships with MSPs. So if a customer does not want to use a public cloud for whatever reasons, connectivity, cost, security, we have partnerships around the globe with private cloud providers and MSPs. One of the coolest features of Aperture Rapid Recovery is the ability to recover a server, including its applications and everything, and all the data with it, in a matter of minutes. We essentially do continuous data protection of any host, virtual or physical, and that host can be recovered in a matter of minutes, either as a virtual server running locally within the Aperture software, or it can be pushed to a VMware or ESX environment. vRanger is an agentless backup software. Network is one of those legacy software pieces that came to us through the Quest acquisition. And Network is simply a backup software of choice if you have a number of different operating systems and platforms in your data center. It can back up pretty much anything, and it can back up to anything. And last but not the least, the DR series backup appliances. These are deduplication storage appliances, and this is probably one of the fastest growing products within the Dell data protection portfolio. It's showing about 200% year-over-year growth, and it's a very simple to use backup appliance that can replace your tapes, VTLs, or other similar devices. Next slide, please. On the next slide, there are some key milestones for the product portfolio. We back up over 75,000 customers, close to hitting 100,000. I think that data was a bit old. We protect about 400 terabytes on one site with one customer, and the rest of the information is up there. Some of the key points I thought you guys might be interested in. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Austin. We'll go on to our next speaker, Mark Campbell with Unitrends. Mark, you're on.
Thank you, Arun. I've come at this a little bit differently. I wanted to address the cloud, and so I started a cloud topology here. But real quickly, Unitrends was a company founded in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina in 1989. Myrtle Beach. It was founded by a doctor who lost some data. We rebooted the company in 2009. Since we're rebooting, we've grown 50% a year. We're up to 400 employees. We have worldwide presence from Sydney to London to Boston and various points of the East Coast in the United States and West Coast. The company currently protects several exabytes of customer data. We have physical appliances that range from 1 terabyte to 180 terabytes in size, virtual appliances for VMware, Hyper-V, and Red Hat Linux that scale even further. Our largest implementation, I think, is just south of a petabyte. And of course, these things you can add together as a single pane of glass. But what's really fueled the company's growth since that 2009 inflection point was we decided to build out a continuity company. The best way that we talk about it is that we view continuity and disaster recovery as the car and backup as the wheels. And so what I've shown here is a little bit different point of view on clouds. We don't really view it as a proprietary cloud or a public DR cloud versus a standard hyperscale cloud like Azure or AWS. Instead, we view it as a series of services. And so what you see on this slide is that we've divided the cloud up into a storage layer, and then a DRAS layer, a spin-up layer, a recovery assurance layer, and finally a management and support layer. What I've done is I've just shown the fact that for our core products, Unitrends Cloud versus AWS Cloud versus Google Cloud, what it is we do. So for Unitrends Cloud, we offer all four. For AWS, we offer storage and cloud and Google storage only. And I just stopped with those clouds. We have a second solution called Boomerang, which is a replication solution that allows you to cloud burst, do migration, and do DRAS between a VMware environment and AWS and soon to be Azure. And so what I show here is just the fact that we're offering those the storage and the DRAS, but we don't have the recovery assurance yet. And so we'll talk about all of those things. On the bottom end of that, on your premises, we protect over 200 versions of operating systems, hypervisors, storage, SAN, applications, all the way from Windows or even heck iSeries up to and including Oracle or an NDMP NAS, that kind of thing. If you go to the next slide, Arun.
Sure.
Now, I've just gone through with you kind of that we're a little bit more cloud agnostic than most companies. This last slide is just an example of the cloud that we launched about a year ago. It's a 10 petabyte VMware cloud that has instances across the world. We sell a DR version of that allows you to take the image of your appliance and put that in the cloud, but our best selling is something called Forever Cloud, 10 cents per protected gigabyte per month with infinite retention, and it is what it says. We offer VMware, Hyper-V, and physical and virtual Windows spin-up at both the server and the client level. And a big difference for us is a feature called Reliable DR that lets you do application-level automation and orchestration at the recovery assurance so that you can get back tested. Basically means you never have to run a DR test again because you're always getting reports up to every minute or 15 minutes, depending on what you're protecting, and see what your actual recovery time is. That's it.
Very good. Thank you, Mark. That's great. And since you have the microphone already, let me switch over to Q&A. And my first question, let me start with you, Mark. So my first question has to do with TCO, total cost of ownership. And the question is, hyperscale clouds like AWS have dirt cheap prices. I mean, look at it. I mean, S3 right now, the latest pricing is 3 cents per gigabyte per month. And if you go into Glacier, Glacier pricing starts at 0.7 cents per gigabyte per month. So my question is, and I'm sure this is a big question on the part of the audience, is how can any specialty cloud solutions compete with that? And very specifically, how does Unitrends compete with that? And then we'll switch over to other solutions. But if you don't mind starting, Mark, that would be great.
Sure. So first of all, we don't compete against it. In other words, we offer choice to customers that allow them to use either Unitrends Cloud, AWS at the Glacier price, or even the infrequently accessed price of 0.0125 cents in their last pricing exercise to Google Nearline. When Google Nearline brought out and did a general announcement, Unitrends was one of the partners. So we don't compete, but we do try to guide people to understand what it is that's the most important thing to them. So if you want spin-up, for example, we've got a product out there for VMware for that. For the main line of the product line, we're offering storage, if that's all you care about. If you want recovery assurance that we talked about, we steer you over to Unitrends Cloud. And if you want managed services, white glove services, where someone's going to make sure that you have an SLA of 1 hour to get back up, and I don't mean just spin up, but get your VPCs, VPNs up, and get your whole environment set up. We offer that. Now, with all of that said, one last note. We actually have a blog post on this over on our blog, but that 0.7 cents or 1 cent that Amazon offers If you look at some of the offerings of the vendors here today, and Unitrends is one of them, we're actually less expensive. How do I get that? So we offer 10 cents a gig a month with infinite retention, which means 7 dailies, 4 weeklies, 12 monthlies, and infinite yearlies. On that kind of schedule, once you get past 10 to 12 months, we're actually less expensive than that same thing within the Amazon cloud. And again, remember, we'll sell you Amazon cloud if that's what you want. And the reason for that is that the way Amazon's charging, they're charging you for actual storage used, as opposed to a simpler technique that a Unitrends, or I'm familiar with Datto's product, that Datto uses, which is just to simplify that to charge you only for retention. So again, if you're interested in the math or interested in how it actually comes out to be less expensive, I encourage you to go over to the Unitrends blog where we explain it. But I would imagine that for a lot of people here today, it's actually less expensive when you count free retention.
So Mark, that's exactly what I was hoping the point that you would bring out, and that is, it's one thing looking at cost per gigabyte per month for retention, and it's another thing looking at it for an overall TCO. And I think your point came across. Proof of the pudding, obviously, is in looking at those numbers. But let me ask the other folks to jump in. Really,
hey,
any of the other three, jump in on that point, guys. Let's hear your viewpoints.
Arun, this is Austin. I'd love to jump in here because I think this is a really good point in talking about the whole Amazon thing. And at first, when you see those prices on paper, they look really inexpensive. But I can tell you from experience that it rarely plays out that way. And we actually know at Datto, because we acquired Backupify last year, and they had petabytes of data in Amazon. And they had negotiated for prices that were even lower than what Amazon publishes on their site. And at the end of the day, it was still cheaper for us to take all their infrastructure out of Amazon and move it to our own cloud, and to move them out of Amazon. The challenge with the public cloud is that, yeah, sure, that cost to store the gig and let it sit there might be really inexpensive, but that cost to actually interact with it, that cost to use it, to check it, to read it in, to write it out, to do whatever it is you want to do besides deposit it into that public cloud, those costs add up really fast and become a huge deal and make disasters incredibly expensive. Whereas, a vendor like Datto, we're not going to charge you when you want to do a restore. And we built out all this infrastructure so that we can do that restore. It's ready to go right away. You get the same performance as if you went with an Amazon cloud. But we're giving you a really simple fee structure so that it's really straightforward and hey, this is what it is. This is what my bill is going to be, no matter how much DR need you have or don't have. Whereas the case of what happens with Amazon is you can run into big issues there when you actually start to use that data that you've stored in the cloud, or try to reassemble it or try to put it all back together. That becomes a huge ordeal. And if you're going to try to run a production workload off some data that you put in Glacier, that's just not going to happen. Just to get the data back, to assemble it all, to make it all work, that's not going to happen. Whereas if you're storing that data in the Datto cloud, you can bring systems back in seconds. Whether they're physical, whether they're virtual, it is seconds to get the machines up and running. And so that's a huge differentiator compared to if you're putting the data in the public cloud. And then the last point that I would make is that when you get to a real scale, as you start to scale past 100 petabytes in size, a lot of the same practices that a large-scale cloud vendor like Datto does, they match what's going on the Amazon side. So we build and design all of our own hardware infrastructure that goes into the data center. We're buying hard drives by the pallet load. So the price to actually build all that infrastructure to store it, because it's not magic how Amazon or Google does it, our prices aren't very different. And so we know that we can be and stay cost competitive long-term in the future compared to how the public cloud is sold.
Very good, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Adi.
Yes, go ahead, Abhi.
Yeah, so I agree with the points made. One more point I'd like to add to that is the ability of private cloud providers to further optimize the data that's stored. I think somebody made a point earlier that you pay for the amount of data you deposit in the cloud, and as you all as is commonly known, the backup workloads, the backups are quite a lot of redundant data in the cloud, and so Amazon or public clouds will charge you for each copy of the data. Now, one of the features that some of the Dell products provide is deduplication and compression in the cloud, which significantly reduces the cost of storing backups in the cloud.
That's a good point. Good point, Abhi. So I think we did pretty good justice to that question. Let me move to my second question, which I will point to Christoph to lead off, and that has to do with functionality. So the question is, what features can a specialty cloud offer that a hyperscale cloud cannot offer, or cannot offer in a cost-effective fashion, or cannot offer because of architectural differences? So, Christoph, if you could lead off with that, please.
Yeah, certainly, and I'd like to add to what was said earlier. I think at the end of the day, when you talk about TCO, there's a lot more that meets the eye. It's not just the cost per gigabyte; it's also the user experience and how you make it easy to consume. Ultimately, I think what I've heard very clearly, and I'd like to confirm, is I think using a public cloud, which is an option we certainly offer with our technology, still requires the end user to have some level of technical skills and experience working with the public clouds. And there's also the idea that you need the network resources to hook all of this together. So I would say on our end, our view, because we serve the SMB and the mid-market, we're looking at it slightly differently. We have recently launched our rServe Cloud, and really it's based on our technology, our UDP technology. And one of the key things we do is deduplication at the source. So we don't send data straight off to the cloud from the source. It goes to an appliance or it goes to a backup server. It gets really deduped there. Actually, I just published a blog today that shows some of the screenshots we get from our customers and some of the results we get. The point I want to make is if you start, first of all, by not sending too much data to the cloud, whether public or specialty, you're saving yourself a ton of money right there. In terms of feature functions, one thing we're doing with the rServe Cloud is really disaster recovery as a service. We allow you to run your environment for a period of time, and either for disaster recovery testing, which I think is a very important capability. Our tagline is a short recovery. It's a trademark, actually. So we do believe that's really one of the key things that people need to do. And frankly, the other thing is the fact that when you don't have a lot of capacity to store because you've deduped it at the source on-prem, you're probably in a better position right there in terms of cost ultimately. I think that the points that were made earlier were very, very good in that you end up paying for it one way or the other. So I think at the end of the day, it's about the experience and simplifying, how you can not only provision the cloud for disaster recovery perspective, from a disaster recovery perspective, but also providing something that's return key that has and gives you availability or near availability capabilities, which is my final point, such as leveraging, for example, virtual standby capabilities, where you can literally stand up a virtual machine and start playing with it in a very, very short period of time. So this notion of connect and go, I think, is ultimately what I think the end user experience needs to be. And again, in our case, dealing with SMBs and mid-market customers, really the attraction of not having to spend all of that upfront capital to get very advanced disaster recovery, enterprise-like disaster recovery capabilities is really, at the end of the day, what the game is.
Very good, Christoph. Thank you. Anybody else on the question of functionality?
Hi, this is Abhi. I'd
Sure.
like to add a few more things. So when it comes to specialty clouds, I think one of the features that makes a lot of sense in that space is a hands-on recovery approach. Now, I know that Amazon provides you ability to send your data offline, for example, to recover from a disaster. But as Christoph pointed out, you need a lot of knowledge and experience running that Amazon environment to be able to accomplish that. Now, what some of the specialty clouds do provide, and Dell provides this in conjunction with partners, again, we don't have a cloud of our own, is an ability to ship data to you over FedEx or overnight instead of downloading hundreds of terabytes to handle your recovery. So that's another feature that I can think of.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Mark, if you don't mind, there's a question that just came through as we were speaking. The question had to do with what did 1, 2, 3, 4 mean on your chart? I thought that might also be a good way for you to possibly discuss functionality, because I know that relates to those 1, 2, 3, 4 related to functionality in that specialty cloud.
Sure. So that 1, 2, 3, 4 represents each layer of any cloud, where 1 is storage, 2 is spin up DRAS, 3 is recovery assurance, and 4 is the management of that. So really quickly, when we talk about all this, right, I get a lot of buyers coming in, and they end up being customers of Unitrends, who say that somebody promised them a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes or something spin up. So within very small environments, that's awesome. That's great. But the bigger problem today is one of, and Christian kind of talked at this, networking, right? The networking, getting that system up and getting your people on top of that system. So before I talk about features real quickly, man, look for SLAs. The biggest problem I have with Amazon, for example, is that I get a best estimate and a best effort in terms of getting me back my data physically. I've got customers that want to get a 180 terabyte machine back from their cloud when flooding happens, like happened here where I'm speaking from in Columbia, South Carolina a few weeks ago. So when you start thinking about those SLAs and what features you need, one of the facts of life is that it's gotten more complicated to be an IT professional, not just because the amount of data is growing, but because of the complexity of how virtual machines and servers work. We all know the story, right? That you've got SharePoint that relies on Exchange and SQL, which rely on Active Directory, which rely on 4 or 5 other things. And the sad truth is that the industry we're in has been awesome at automating backup and horrific at automating recovery. So the most important feature to meet your SLAs, first of all, make sure you got SLAs that you'll be up. Your business will be up, not just your server, not just your VM, but your business will be up within a specified amount of time, contractually guaranteed. And secondly, try to avoid DR testing. And I know that sounds weird, but the truth is DR testing typically fails. It typically takes an enormous amount of time for the managed service provider or the VAR, for the end user and for the vendor to get it right. And it's not because these vendor tools are bad, that backup goes bad. It's that you start backing up more and more to the cloud, and you start missing your RPOs because of increased data, and you start missing your RTO plans. You want to make sure that every few minutes, up to at least every day, you're getting a report back not about RTOs and RPOs, but around recovery time actual, what you're actually able to recover, so that you guarantee certified no that you're going to be able to spin up not just a VM, not just a server, but an entire environment. That's, in terms of features, there's a lot more we could go through. The only other one I would tell you is that if you're using an Amazon cloud or an Azure cloud, make sure, we all talk about storage costs. Make sure that you're actually using something called a pilot light design. In other words, make sure that the software that writes doesn't involve compute or block storage. Because Glacier at 7/10 of a cent sounds great, As Austin kind of hinted at, it takes 4 hours minimal to get back the first byte of data from Glacier. But even the 1 penny a gig, that's a decent price, but your EBS or your block store is 10 cents. Your compute is expensive. So you want to use techniques in hyperscale clouds to make sure that you're not just doing it the same old way, and those features are basically just known as pilot light. I think that's about it in terms of the most important features, but I'm going to say as I leave this, the last thing, SLAs. Just make sure that they are nailed down.
Excellent point, Mark. I have a whole bunch of other questions, and I want to keep moving, but a new question just came in from the audience. I had it, but I had it a little bit later on, but I'm going to switch gears and move it up. The question from the audience is, how does each vendor address security concerns, e-discovery, government regulations, etc.? So anybody that wants to jump in on that one, please go for it.
I'm happy to jump in here. I don't know who's going there.
I heard two voices, but I couldn't tell who was who. So whoever just said last, please go.
Okay. This is Austin from Datto. So definitely great question. Security is incredibly important, and it's something that at Datto we spend a ton of time thinking about and continually working on. It is an endless battle, and something that is really almost I don't want to say an unwinnable war, but something that you're never done with. And Datto's approach to security is really around giving our customers the tools so that they can truly own their data no matter where it lives. And so that means starting encryption at the source. And so we want to encrypt that information as soon as possible. As soon as we read it off the disk, or SSD, whatever, from whatever machine it's coming from, whatever that data is that we're protecting, we want to encrypt it. And we want to encrypt it with a key that our customers can own, that our customers have. And that's the best place to start, so that then no matter how that data travels through our systems, we can't read it, we can't get into it, it is locked down, it is safe, and hiding behind that customer key, and until the customer enters the key, there's nothing that we can do. And so that's really the direction that we go down the road with all this stuff. It is really important that whatever vendor you look at, you go through a process where you are the only one that holds the key. If you look at a lot of the consumer level kind of file sync and share stuff, you run into this all the time where like, hey, you just log into Dropbox and they say, oh yeah, your data is all encrypted. And it's like, it may be, but Dropbox has the key. So the value of that encryption is almost none because they could just go in there and get it. Whereas in our case, when you set it up, you are the sole holder of the key, and there is no other way through that wicket. And I think that many of the vendors on this call use the same type of process.
Thank you, Austin. That's great. Anybody else? I mean, I think somewhere along the line, you implied it, Austin, but I think even data in flight between the two sites is encrypted, of course. But how does that extend into e-discovery? And by doing this, do you automatically meet HIPAA regulations, for example, for healthcare or insurance? And if somebody could also cover the point about your particular, if you have a specialty cloud, what certifications do you meet? I know there's something called 16, SAA 16. I know there's Type 4. Those are all related to security, either logical or physical. So if you all can cover that, I think that would go a long way too. I have never seen.
I'd be glad to jump in. Excuse me, Aaron. I talked over you. Is there something else?
No, please go right ahead.
Okay. So in terms, there's two things that are being talked about, right? So let's talk about HIPAA in particular. So with HIPAA, you have to have a BAA, and each BAA can be different depending upon what it is that is in your local environment. So you want to make sure that the vendor that has the cloud is willing to work with you on your unique BAA and accommodate that. So when I know you just mentioned HIPAA. When you talk about things like SSAE 16 and some of the more what I think of as infrastructure level compliance standards, I think that's important. I heard a joke the other day where someone said that someone had a data center in a homeless shelter. And obviously it was a little bit overstated. But you want to make sure that you've got that data in a physically secure location, and that you've got those main infrastructure certs like SSA 16. And it's not rolling off the top of my head what the evolved IAS standards are. Finally, those are actually done a little bit easier in private clouds. Realize that when you use a public cloud, while there can be some basic infrastructure certs, the truth is it comes down to how you handle it. So we were just talking, and it was just mentioned, right, that about doing source level encryption. Let's assume that you're using something like an AES 256, either strong or weak form. Encryption actually it impacts dedupe. It impacts some other things that you do. And so you want to make sure it's in flight. You want to make sure that the encryption's at rest. But also realize, right, that most of these encryption forms eventually can be broken. And so perimeter level security is important. With an Amazon or Azure, you're responsible for that. With a private cloud implementation, as was said earlier, you spend a lot of time I shouldn't say private cloud, a proprietary cloud. You spend a lot of time going through that perimeter security, doing intrusion testing, all sorts of things. So the bottom line on all of this is there are trade-offs, and the truth is that, and I say this as somebody offering both, proprietary clouds do have an edge on security because typically there's a lot of focus on it. It's only larger companies that have a chief security officer and that have a practice where you might want to be using AWS or Azure and making sure that you as the buyer and the customer are spending that operational expenditure and labor to secure that cloud.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. That's excellent. I think that does justice to the topic. I hope, and if it doesn't, I know the person who asked the question can send secondary questions, and we'll deal with it. So let me move on, and I'll point this question towards Abhi to start, but I know it pertains to all the rest of you as well. So Abhi, how hard is it to recover in AWS or Azure, after you had a massive failure, not a file lost on the primary site, but a massive failure? And then I know that the specialty value-add cloud folks that we have on the call here, they have all kinds of services. I know Unitrans has a white glove service. I think Datto has other similar kinds of things. Arxer probably does as well. How do you compete against? How do you fill that gap? Do you use professional services? How do you deal with that catastrophic situation that happens, and you need to get things up and running in Amazon or in Azure?
Sure. So, initially I talked about how difficult it is to retrieve that data and the costs associated with it. I guess this question is more about how to recover your application server into Amazon. And we do this quite often. In fact, one of the most popular features that we have in Aperture is the virtual standby in cloud. So we can back up your physical server or your virtual server and recover it in cloud. Now, in the process of doing that, we have to deal a lot with differences in the hypervisor between various clouds. As you know, Azure uses a version of Hyper-V. AWS uses HVM. There are subtle differences which make the job a little bit harder. Now, of course, we have automated most of these things. Where it gets a little tricky are some intrinsic limitations that these cloud vendors have. For example, you can only have about 9 terabytes in a physical block device in the application server when you restore in Azure or Amazon. Now, this is where specialty clouds make a difference. For example, we have partnerships with several vendors where you can restore a server with hundreds of terabytes of physical capacity, maybe something using some hypervisor like VMware. And so this is where I think having specialty clouds can allow us to customize the solution to match the customer's needs. And as we all know, servers are getting larger, capacities are getting larger. So having the ability to custom design a solution is very important. Now, that said, we are working with Azure and Amazon to extend our functionality of Dell products into these clouds. Now, the timeline is not quite clear because a lot of moving parts are involved. But that's kind of the basic challenge that I guess everybody faces in using public clouds.
Got it. Any other comments? Any other thoughts, guys?
Yeah, Arun, Christoph here from ArcServe. Yeah, just a couple of things. In our case, we actually have a high availability module. Literally, you can recover failover to your instance in Amazon if you want to do that. As stated earlier, it's going to require an investment that understands the requirement for storage, for compute, but it's something you could do. You could have literally be a few seconds behind and leverage this type of technology, although it's probably more cost efficient at the end of the day if you're going to be doing this to potentially do that with a secondary data center or through a partner, a service partner, which is another option. The one thing we also do from an ArcServe cloud perspective is from a recovery standpoint, you can, again, literally within less than an hour, maybe 30 minutes, but let's say up to an hour to be safe. You essentially call us up and we'll set up your instance in the ArcServe cloud for you to start your either disaster recovery testing or recovery processes, depending on what's going on with your situation. One of the points I also want to make is, as you pick the vendor, one of the questions you should ask is, where are the data centers beyond the certifications? Because they have to be certified to a large extent in many different ways. They have to be located in geographies that make sense depending on where you are as a business, because if a disaster strikes, you don't know where it's going to strike. You don't want to have exposures there. So another point I wanted to make to even be able to start a recovery. And finally, we also leverage a capability we call Jumpstart, which allows us to literally copy a copy of the deduped environment and ship it back to you in a Pelican case in case you've actually physically lost your environment. We can rebuild the actual backup server from scratch in a very simple fashion. We'll also use this capability for seeding the cloud, which is something we haven't talked about. But remember, if you got a bunch of data you got to copy somewhere, there's a cost for that bandwidth. It's nice to have methodologies where you don't have to actually copy the data from a networking cost perspective. So that's really what I had on our end.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm going to jump. If it's okay, Arun, I'm going to jump in really quickly. It's 3 o'clock. Never mind. I'm sorry, man.
Yes. So Mark, I just wanted to say we're reaching the top of the hour. It's 1 minute left. I think they give us about 3 minutes past the hour, and then or perhaps it's 5 before they cut us off. So very quick remark, if you like, and in fact, let me do this. There's so many other questions I wanted to discuss. If there's a limit to the types of applications that can be dealt with within specialty clouds and in public clouds. I wanted to deal with, what happens to costs as we move forward. And the public clouds keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I have questions on RTOs and RPOs. How low can they go on both sides? I have questions about MSPs. And I know we couldn't do justice to all of them, but if the audience is interested in those questions, please send me emails, and we'll find another opportunity to deal with them by bringing a panel such as this together. And so with that, Mark, let me give you the baton if you want to make a quick comment on things, and then I think after that we'll wrap it up.
It'll be real quick to the last point. One of the things you want to make sure of is you're going to pay me now or pay me later in terms of understanding your infrastructure, understanding spin up. So make sure, for example, you're protecting VMware, that you've got a way to translate, if you're in AWS, the vSwitch over to a cloud formation. On the flip side, if you're dealing with proprietary clouds, make sure that there's an understanding when you do that first seeding process that you've got some kind of services that set you up so that you're not fumbling around to recover all the way. That was it.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. And so I think, given the limited time, I know we could talk for another hour. There's so much more to cover, but we'll wrap up at this stage. And I really appreciate the audience spending all the time. And we have 92 folks listening. The number's only gone up during the call. Nobody's dropped off, so I really appreciate and thanks everybody. And then also thank you very much all the panelists. I think all the points got covered really well, and I do appreciate it very much. With that, I will say bye for now, and we'll do this again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.